There are a lot of obstacles to making these tapes of mine. The iPhone system, for example, is one I still do not have absolute confidence in. I've noticed that the first one I put up got a half dozen people were interested enough to watch. That means that they probably have wondered what I've been up to and decided to check in. I'm sorry that it wasn't better, but operationally, I still don't have a lot of faith in the new arrangement that I have to use. Maybe I'll get used to it. If someone was turned off, I don't know how to win them back. I apologize for that because I know the issues are very important to everyone. Reasons for tuning into me about these issues, I think, probably are understandable. Everybody is living in a very complex and tricky and deceptive environment. But when it comes to me, a number of these operational deceptions are very focused and acute. People were aware that I had investigated persuasively that AIDS was an attack and it was organized, and that I know something about human history and the philosophy that is carried by a number of leaders who have had persuasion in our society, an impact on our society, both as leaders of our society and as adversaries of our society. I've read quite a few of these people and heard from survivors of World War II all my life. So the questions that I face might help you focus your feelings about the situation that you face. And as time has gone by, I've gotten a little bit more informed about what it is I think is going on and studied the language skills that are necessary to share with you my opinion in such a way that you might be able to identify some things that are escaping your analysis, or maybe not. Maybe you just want to hear the same things you might be thinking from another person's point of view. Or maybe you disagree and would like to formulate your disagreement a little more carefully based on someone else's point of view about what could be happening. Now, one of the things that I'm sure is going on is that we have a media government that has bypassed our society's legal government. And they've gotten away with it with bipartisan mechanisms by stacking the social order that exists in Washington with people who are party to what they're doing. This isn't a conspiracy theory, this is a conspiracy. Warren Commission was a good example of that. People would rather believe the fantasy, so they uploaded down rather. That was one of the way they worked, to symbolize rather believe in. The Warren Commission, which was something that was put together by Ian Fleming and Alan Dulles and the royal family, Queen Elizabeth, and so on, to get Kennedy out of there, because they're still very afraid of him. And the 60s, the people who were killed, the message died with the men, was what they were intending. Whereas Hitler escaped and his message is coming back. The robber barons always knew. You can study the history of the carbon. I have some old books about it around here somewhere. I'd like to find it and show it to you, but maybe it'll turn up while I'm talking. Yeah, here's one. Fuel Economy. It's an old book. Steam plants by Grounds. You see, these people knew that you could heat up the atmosphere. So that's what they're doing in an effort to sell their idea of death in the family. DEF comes up a lot. Death in the family is their excuse for AIDS and COVID, which is what they've done. Now, I almost went to the Mariners today, and I turned around and doubled back because the Mariners were a good example. They don't care about us. That's all. They don't care about us. Maybe they think they do, but I don't believe it. You know, they were going around. It was to me. It was really. I was extremely strange because I knew COVID was a weapon system of some sort by these assholes who were behind AIDS. So they're going Black Lives Matter, all lives matters, and fighting about this stuff. They don't care anybody's lives matter. You know, they're just those celebrities in the men being hyped by the media, and I'm still very friendly to Greta Thunberg, but she was uploaded right in time with all of this, and it scares me. And what did I care about Cersei Kennedy? They don't care. Black Lives Matter is the answer to the murder mystery of Cersei Kennedy, which to me isn't really that much of a mystery. But I have some friends, and they've often said to me things like, well, like Jeannie, she said, the people in Pittsburgh just lie. That's just the way they are. I mean, I don't think she has Down syndrome, she was pointed out. I don't think she realizes it intellectually. They are advocating and studying and selling Adolf Hitler's criminal philosophy the way they do from the University of Pittsburgh. And it's really a vocation for them. But she says, well, she just casually dismissed their stuff. They just lie. Everybody knows they're just a bunch of liars. And, Greg Chin said, well, you were obviously beaten half to death. You have scars tissue all over your eyes and stuff, and you have that neurotrauma. And so, some of my friends, you might think, well, they might, John Lennon's death is such a public relations bonanza for the people who they say killed him, and not, but he was a member of their soccer team, as how McCartney puts it. When he compares Pittsburgh and Liverpool with their team players, it's a public relations bonanza for these team players. So you should knock it off that he faked his death and get on the bus with people like Greg and Jeannie, because you might have a better chance if you do that. But the thing is these friends get chased off too. Jeannie was attacked and raped, and Donnie Chin's good friend, Greg Chin's good friend, Donnie Chin, was gunned down. They're going to chase off. They're going to enforce their public relation bonanza. They're going to enforce their team play either way. So I might as well tell the truth about John Lennon faking it, tricking. That's why you use double fantasy. It's like Jimmy Craig's going to get Midori. It's a fantasy. It's a two versions fantasy. And this is the royal mystique of their war game that developed from their control over media. So we're dealing with a situation of media spin. If you look at Spin Magazine, right, socially it's very condensed format. Spin Magazine was funded Swid Powell. Swid Powell was the employer of Dia Dallas, who promoted a Cliff Richards book film called Time Must Have a Stop. And she called me when John Lennon pulled his sneaky escape, right, to tell me he was dead, right? And Dia was in France with Dermond, and you get Diamond de Gaulle, who in the 70s was studying immunogenetics and Satanism, coming with her dagger at the World Trade Center and then blowing it up and saying she represents the victims. Because, these were the people who ran on the whole thing. Cliff Robertson was up in an airplane above the World Trade Center, and they confiscated JFK's enigma as a joke by casting him as the JFK in the film PT 109, and then putting him on the opening series of The Outer Limits. We've taken control of your television set, which was postponed for Kennedy's funeral, right? And then it's about like this thing about like a beeping thing, like a heart signal, because they're playing their secret weapon is the force of creation. In the womb and in the atom bomb, the force of creation was adroitly spin doctored by when Sharon Samuels called me and relayed the tape to James W. Child, who was the little boy bomb, the child, little boy, had written The Moral Dimension of Nuclear War, and they were trying to equate my saying I preferred Sharon to have an abortion, but I would raise the child if she wanted me to the decision to drop the atom bomb. This is Cliff Robinson's, BBB, force of creation, secret weapon. It's the mentality of it. And Sharon Samuel's phone call to me was a click buzz thing from Revolution Number 9. She was wired to Ono and Warhol. And she's the one who introduced me to Gail Burstyn, who wrote the script that the agency of Robert Fripp. She appears in likeness on the cover of his records and stuff. I found an image of holding her ears in likeness of her in an Ayn Rand film. Ayn Rand's science fiction was about evacuating prime movers and giving people the impression they disappeared. And it says it would be like starting over. You see, they want, they led me out here to the Pompeii, and that dude, Mike Pompeius, or whatever his name is. A good defense is a good offense. They tried out Greta Thunberg. How dare you? These were people threatening to nuke the Magic Mountain, the monks of war, right? We're going to give you the sermon on the Magic Mountain. It disappears and then reappears. And I found this Veronica Lake thing. She holds the Ace of Spades, disappears, and comes back. It's called, it's from this gun for hire. It's called Now You See It, right? And it's supposed to be about love, right? But the disappearing act of Hitler and the disappearing act of Lenin was fused together by this gang. They called it Casper. And the guy who tortured me was named Casper. And then, the friendly fascism of Hitler is what Pompeius and Trump are promoting. I don't believe Greta knew all this. She was born to it. But, the letters say, and it's strange how all I wanted to say has already been written. The IRS knows where everybody lives. They gave me the Social Security number in 1984, it begins. And Dee Dee used to shoot King correlate to, but she's the new symbol of love, la, 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 la. When they gas me in King's Heavenly Estate, you get it, the Holocaust survivors, King's Estate, King's Heavenly Estate. The road to the gas chambers was called the road to heaven and so forth. And they even had violinists who would accompany people the way the Beatles accompanied people to the gas chambers. We used to spell out the particulars. She knew welfare law. Because of welfare law, I can get this, I can get that, I can get this, I can get that. So, all of this work that I do, Thawes Gordon, magna cum from Harvard, was really fascinating, almost transfixed by a chapter titled Robert Musil, which, remarkably enough, doesn't get anybody anywhere. Well, it's Sisyphusian, I tell these stories and I remind people that all this is real, but it doesn't really get me anywhere, So, there's things that I have written in scribbles that I'd like to talk about. It takes me a second to figure out what it was that was on my mind that I think was very important to get to, and some of my scribbles aren't decipherable, and as a result, things have to come back to me, But when you look at the spin machine of the media, Daya worked for Swid Powell, which is like South Africa Powell. We know that Frippytoon, who worked with Trump, acknowledgement to DT and Gail Burstyn when they were killing, you think back when they slaughtered me with blows and killed Dean Turno. Trippytoon was with Colin Powell, Swid Powell, South African, because South African Secret Service was all in this media, this world game media, right? America's supposed to conform to the royal fixe on the ark. All lives matter, Black Lives Matter. What would these people in India matter? Where's our Mercy Force vaccines getting help to those people, Now it's all media spin, so you have this all in place to support Cliff Robertson, the Kennedy assassins, and they kill Sergio, just knock another one off. What do we care? What do the Mariners care? Why am I going to go and see them play baseball? That's sort of silly. So they take control of our television sets, and they did literally. If you look at the first episode of The Wild Wild West, this stuff is in the time tunnel, too. They have Ulysses S. Grant complaining about carpetbaggers. This is like Grant, and it totally distorts our history. Rutherford B. Hayes was the one who was complaining about carpetbagging. But they took control of our TV set. They cast Cliff Robertson as JFK, even though Cliff Robertson was in on killing him. And this is a joke, inside joke by these Casper people. So obviously there's something to muse on in that. And people allude to it, like there was this guy Vello or something in Latin. He says, "Oh, but she alluded to suspicions that the CIA may have been involved in it." I'm telling you, this illusion stuff. Get it out of here. There's nothing illusion about it except to hypnotize you that nothing you can say matters. How did Vince Irene, that piece of never step from the city of Pittsburgh, manage to get me? They had me in seizures. They raped my best friend. They tortured me. I was homeless. They chemically castrated me, and they've gotten away with also poisoning me in the mouth. How did they get away with that? Well, one of the things that they do is they make you normalize. It's in your best interest to behave better if you try to get along with them. So, see, you're accepting them as your advocates, right? And all is well. Well, that obviously not all is well, just because you're trying to, stabilize the situation. But, that's why I'm a cardboard fan, right? But the thing is that how they tortured me, put neuroplasm in my head so I couldn't think, right? And as a child, I was a golem. They just led me around and gave me, and if I disobeyed them, I would get seizures. So they had me with an implant for control. I was a neuro zombie in that way. And then they said, "Oh, you wanted to do this." I didn't want to do it. Then they ignore the evidence that the whole claim that I wanted to do is ridiculous. And what they upload today, for example, from the media network system is the idea that promoting the idea that someone should skip school is, if you're an adult when they're a child, is a misdemeanor, right? And what they're trying to do is draw this kicky connect from Warhol that your support for Greta Thunberg means that you were also fighting the good fight when you were biting your nails bloody, pleading with the principal to have somebody walk you home because they were going to kill you, and then disappearing from school. This is Yoko Ono's rewiring, hardwiring of logic. Nobody in the right mind would think there's any truth to the idea that being kidnapped and tortured and refused to go to school was analogous to taking a day off to wake up the world about something like global warming. But they point to pornography, right? They say, well, he liked Sarah when she was little. It was a controversial Japanese photographer who promoted Sarah. And she eventually blossomed into a soft porn star. So, Greta Thunberg emerges from that media. What's she, your next soft porn star? And they have it set up with that mean dude who's the brother of that wonderful, wonderful North Korean girl, and it's like it's the same media that produces male, the beta image of Asian, produces Greta Thunberg, and you're supposed to not be able to tell them apart. And this is Vince Irene's Catholic service workers working the wires from Carnegie Mellon to justify mass murder, right? And they have they paid for and sponsored abortion of my children. They were refusing to allow me to have children. They were controlling the women that I was engaged to be married to, so they could kill the children and then say that make me feel guilty, right? Like they hired a guy to drive a school bus recklessly and then said I was the driver. I mean, that's their whole shtick. That's how they operate. So, you would have to be in your out of your mind, to believe them. But some people just fall naturally into belief systems. Clint Eastwood, when he wrote to me, I saw this movie where he seems to be very nice to adults, seniors. They said, "Oh, you're still alive and kicking. You're not dead yet." And he was like, "Oh, no such luck, I guess." You know what kind of person he is. He's a likable, adorable man. But you have to wonder about Clint Hill being so proximate to Jackie when they killed Kennedy. So the question is Clint in on this stuff? Is he ready to confess while he makes his little flower pots at the federal? No such luck. I mean, I thought I was telling people, oh, he really likes elderly people. I like him too. And then what do we get? We get a geriatricide. So maybe there's two faces at work there. I have a right to ask that, buddy, because you're picking on me. And what they did was they went in and detonated the neuroplasm. They detonated it, right? Now, look at the old story of South African Secret Service didn't want to get caught poisoning Mandela in the brain because he would embarrass the ANC to see him in such a state, right? So they do that to a white, and the South African blacks are like, well, that's cool, and so you think you're better than us? Is what these KKK people get away with saying, and that's why the idea that Lennon could be promoting the people who killed him is all wrapped up in this idea of him being a team player. Because the team player is the money. 1 cent is the end of morality. If you want to tell the truth, you better be a Christian, turn all over the money. And so that's why the media pulled that story where Providence was asking for $100 million, and then they gave the word to a gang to shoot like 9 people because they know that this story is paid for and sponsored by the people in the Swiss Alps chateaus, which is where they held some of those Nazi war criminals. What seconds are called the drug of choice, cocaine, woods, or whatever. So the drugs I did had nothing to do with choice. This is about hegemony. And you're supposed to be either take them voluntarily or you're making a choice and you're going to end up swallowing them anyway. And that's the sort of situation that we have. And I'm just a publicly outspoken person who understands that we're dealing with the criminally insane. And it doesn't matter how many times they say there's some sort of reason. UW dialectical. Something about status quo, queers, this and that. John Lennon here, holiness, sacred Pentagon, Disney. Ringo Starkey has the right to kill Circe because his floating uterus is magical. All that stuff is criminally insane. That's the bottom line. That's all there is to it. Don't make more of it than what it is. These people are sick and undeserving of anything but police investigation. That's all they deserve, police investigation. So I think people should get on it, talk to their cops, and say, look into this stupid mass murder stuff, because these people knew they were heating up the environment. They're not pulling some necessary evil. There's no necessary evil to geriatricide. No, sir. We can save the earth and let people live too. That's why we learn to go to school, learn how to think. The message still continues from the Kennedys. Fuck Adolf Hitler and fuck you if you think he's right.